The evening air was crisp as Mai walked into the downtown community center, her arms full of craft supplies for tomorrow's kindergarten class. She never expected that this ordinary Thursday would change her life forever. As she struggled with the door, a deep voice offered help, and she turned to find herself looking into the warmest brown eyes she'd ever seen. "Let me get that for you," said Ray, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed out of place in this humble setting. Later, she would learn he was there to discuss a donation for the center's after-school programs. But at that moment, he was just a kind stranger with a gentle smile. May thanked him, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, completely unaware that her paint-stained teaching apron and genuine smile had caught his attention more than any of the polished socialites he usually met. As he helped her carry the supplies to her classroom, they talked about her students and their art projects. Her eyes lit up when describing how one little boy had finally learned to write his name that day. "You really love what you do, don't you?" Ray asked, leaning against a tiny desk meant for 5-year-olds. "These kids are my whole world," May replied honestly, not trying to impress him. Perhaps that's what drew him in even more. The next day, a massive box of art supplies appeared at the center with a simple note asking if she have coffee with him. One coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into weekend adventures. Ray showed her a world she'd never known existed, whisking her away on his private jet to see the cherry blossoms in Japan, taking helicopter rides over city skylines, and dining in restaurants where the chef knew him by name. But what touched me most weren't the grand gestures. It was how Ray would sit cross-legged on the floor of her classroom after hours, helping her put up new bulletin boards. How he remembered every story about her students and asked about their progress. How he looked at her with the same amazement whether she was dressed in a designer gown at his charity galas or wearing her old jeans while they walked through the park. Their different worlds collided in beautiful ways. May introduced Ray to street food vendors who made the best dumplings in the city, and he actually preferred them to his usual fancy restaurants. She taught him to find joy in simple things, like flying kites on Sunday afternoons or having picnics in the park. Meanwhile, Ray showed her that dreams could be bigger than she'd ever imagined. "I never knew life could feel like this," May told her sister one evening, helping to wash dishes after their weekly family dinner. "He makes me feel like I can be myself and still be enough." What May didn't notice were the subtle changes in how Ray's business associates looked at her during formal events, or the whispers that followed them at social gatherings. She was too genuinely happy to see the shadows gathering around their fairy tale. When Ray proposed 6 months later, under a sky full of stars on his yacht, May's yes came straight from her heart. The ring was enormous, but she would have said yes even if he proposed with a paper ring. She loved the man who sang off-key with her students during classroom visits, not his billion-dollar empire. The wedding plans quickly grew beyond May's simple dreams. Ray's mother insisted on a grand affair befitting their family status. 500 guests, crystal centerpieces, a designer dress that cost more than May's yearly salary. But she agreed to it all because she saw how happy it made Ray to give her the world. Her kindergarten students were thrilled to be flower girls and ring bearers, and Ray didn't even blink at the idea of having 20 small children in their wedding party. "They're your family," he'd said, "which makes them my family too." As the big day approached, May was floating on clouds of happiness. She'd found not just love, but a partner who seemed to value everything she was, exactly as she was. Or so she thought, until the morning that would change everything. The morning of her wedding day dawned bright and clear. May sat in the bridal suite of the city's most expensive hotel, surrounded by flowers that cost more than her car. Her sister carefully adjusted the veil in her hair, while their mother dabbed at tears with an embroidered handkerchief. "You look like a princess," whispered one of her kindergarten students who'd come early to get ready as a flower girl. May hugged the little girl, careful not to wrinkle her designer gown. The dress was beautiful, but it felt heavy on her shoulders, nothing like the simple lace gown she originally dreamed of wearing. The first hint that something was wrong came when Ray's best man missed the morning preparations. Then his mother's assistant called to say she wasn't feeling well and wouldn't make it. May pushed down the worry growing in her stomach. "It's just wedding day jitters," her sister assured her, but her eyes showed concern. The magnificent cathedral was filled with 500 guests, most of whom May had never met. She recognized her students' parents, her fellow teachers, and her large extended family all cramped into the back few rows. The front rows, reserved for Ray's business associates and social circles, were strangely empty. As the minutes ticked by, the murmuring grew louder. May stood in the church entrance, her father holding her arm, waiting for the wedding coordinator's signal. But instead of the wedding march, she heard gasps and the buzz of phones receiving messages. The coordinator, looking pale, hurried over with her phone extended. There, in black and white, was a message that would shatter May's world. "I'm sorry, but I can't go through with this. You're wonderful, but marriage is about more than love. Our worlds are too different. I need someone who can truly be part of my social circle, who understands the responsibilities of my position. Please forgive me." The room spun. May's father caught her before her knees gave way. She could hear her mother's angry crying, her sister's shocked gasp, and worst of all, the whispers of 500 guests watching her dreams crumble. But it was the confused voices of her students that broke her. "Miss May, why are you crying? Where's Mr. Ray? Isn't there going to be a party?" May straightened her spine, years of teaching kindergarten having taught her how to be brave when little eyes were watching. She walked to the altar, not as a bride, but as herself, and faced the crowd. With dignity that impressed even Ray's snobbiest guests, she announced that there would be no wedding today. She insisted that everyone enjoy the reception food, no sense in wasting it. She hugged her students, posed for pictures with her family, and even managed to smile. But inside, she felt hollow. That evening, as her sister helped her out of the wedding dress, May finally broke down. "I've been feeling so tired and sick lately," she sobbed. "I thought it was just wedding stress, but..." She pulled out a pregnancy test from her purse. Positive. She hadn't even had the chance to tell him. The next few weeks passed in a blur. May threw herself into teaching, finding comfort in her students' innocent love. She ignored the gossip magazines that painted her as a gold digger, the social media posts analyzing every detail of the failed wedding. But when morning sickness hit hard, she couldn't ignore that anymore. The doctor's appointment was meant to confirm her pregnancy. Instead, it changed everything. "Ms. Chen," the doctor said, looking at the ultrasound with wide eyes, "I'm seeing multiple heartbeats. 4, to be exact." May stared at the screen, at the tiny flickering lights that represented her babies. Quadruplets. A 1 in 700,000 chance. She laughed until she cried, then cried until she laughed again. That night she made a decision. She wouldn't contact Ray. She wouldn't ask for money or support. These babies were her miracle, her new beginning. She would leave the city, start fresh somewhere else, away from the whispers and pitying looks. As she packed up her apartment, she found one of Ray's expensive watches he'd left behind. Once, its value had intimidated her. Now, she looked at it and felt nothing but peace. She donated it to her school's fundraising auction, knowing it would fund a new playground for her students. It felt right, turning something from her past into hope for the future. The last thing she did before leaving was visit her classroom one final time. On each tiny desk, she left a note for her students, explaining that Miss May had to move away, but would always love them. As she turned out the lights, she placed a hand on her still flat stomach and whispered, "Ready for a new adventure, little ones?" She didn't know that this wasn't the end of her story with Ray, but just the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. 5 years passed like a whirlwind. May sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea and watching her quadruplets playing in the backyard of their modest but comfortable home. Little Lily was teaching her brothers, Tommy and Alex, how to make daisy chains, while Luna, the youngest by 2 minutes, was completely absorbed in drawing with chalk on the patio. The journey to this peaceful moment hadn't been easy. May remembered those first months in the small town she'd chosen, 3 hours away from her old life. She'd arrived with nothing but her savings and a determination to succeed. The pregnancy had been challenging. Carrying 4 babies was no small feat. Her new neighbors, though curious about the single mom-to-be, had welcomed her with open arms. Mrs. Wu, the elderly lady next door, brought homemade soup every Wednesday. "My mother's recipe," she'd say, patting Me's growing belly. "Good for the babies." The local music store owner, hearing that May was a teacher, offered her part-time work teaching piano lessons, which she could do sitting down as her pregnancy progressed. When the quadruplets arrived 2 months early, the whole town seemed to rally around them. The fire chief organized a diaper drive. The local moms group set up a meal train that lasted 2 months. The library ladies knitted 4 matching blankets, each a different color so May could tell her tiny babies apart in those blur of early days. Now, watching her healthy, happy 5-year-olds play, those difficult times felt like a distant dream. The music lessons that had started as a way to make ends meet had grown into Miss May's Music Academy, a thriving business she ran from the converted garage. She taught piano and voice to children from 3 neighboring towns, and her waiting list was months long. "Mama, look!" Luna called out, proudly showing off her chalk masterpiece, 4 stick figures holding hands with a taller one in the middle. "That's us." May's heart swelled. Her children never seemed to notice that their family was different from others. To them, having 3 built-in best friends was the most natural thing in the world. The academy had become more than just a music school. Other single mothers, drawn by May's story, began bringing their children for lessons. Soon, she started a support group that met monthly in her living room. They shared resources, advice, and most importantly, hope. If Miss May can raise 4 babies alone, she'd overheard one mom say, "I can surely handle my 2." Her own family visited often, filling the house with laughter and love. Her sister had moved nearby last year, unable to bear being far from her nieces and nephews. Their Sunday family dinners became a tradition that the children looked forward to all week. The kids knew about their father in the simple way children understand things. "Sometimes families are different," Mai had explained when they asked. "Ours is special because we have so much love it takes 5 hearts to hold it all." That answer seemed to satisfy them, though occasionally they'd ask questions that made her heart ache. "Mama," Tommy had asked once, "do I laugh like my daddy?" Mai had pulled him close and told him the truth, that his laugh was entirely his own, just like his kind heart and his talent for making others smile. She never spoke badly of Ray, knowing that her children would form their own opinions when they were older. The Academy's success had allowed May to start a scholarship program for children who couldn't afford music lessons. She remembered her own humble beginnings as a kindergarten teacher and wanted to pass on the gift of music to everyone, regardless of their circumstances. The recitals, held in the town hall twice a year, became community events that everyone looked forward to. Life fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were a cheerful chaos of getting 4 kindergartners ready for school. Then came music lessons, homework help, and endless rounds of Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star as new students learned their first notes. Evenings were for family dinner, story time, and listening to her children's endless stories about their day. Money was sometimes tight, but they always had enough. Mai had learned to be resourceful, shopping sales, accepting hand-me-downs from friends, and teaching her children that happiness came from being together, not from having things. The kids wore second-hand clothes without complaint, and thought sharing bedrooms was an endless sleepover with their best friends. "Mama," Lily called from the garden, now wearing the daisy chain crown she'd made, "can we have a picnic dinner outside?" Mai looked at her children's hopeful faces and smiled. These simple moments, she realized, were worth more than all the luxury she'd almost married into. What May didn't know was that her peaceful world was about to be shaken. In a city 3 hours away, Ray was about to discover something that would change everything. It was a perfect autumn Saturday when May's carefully built world began to crack. She'd taken the children to Heritage Park for their annual fall festival, a 2-hour drive from home, but worth it for the petting zoo and carnival rides they'd been excited about for weeks. "Look, Mama, bunnies." Luna squealed, pressing her face against the petting zoo fence. Tommy and Alex were busy watching a juggler perform nearby, while Lily methodically collected fallen maple leaves in every shade of red and orange. At 5 years old, they were at that magical age where everything was an adventure. Mi's brother Kai, who often helped with the kids on weekend outings, was buying cotton candy from a nearby vendor. The children called him Uncle Kai, and he spoiled them recklessly with treats and piggyback rides. Today he wore a t-shirt with "World's Best Uncle" printed on it, a birthday gift from the Quadruplets that he proudly wore every chance he got. "Uncle Kai, can we ride the carousel again?" Tommy called out, running toward him with Alex close behind. Kai scooped them both up, one under each arm, making them giggle uncontrollably. May smiled, snapping photos with her phone. These were the moments she lived for. None of them noticed the man who had stopped dead in his tracks 30 feet away, staring at them with growing recognition. Ray had come to the festival to meet potential investors, not expecting his past to crash into him on this sunny afternoon. At first, he thought he was seeing things. But no, that was definitely May, looking even more beautiful than he remembered. Her hair was shorter now, and she wore simple jeans and a warm sweater instead of the designer clothes he'd once draped her in. But it was her laugh that caught his attention, the same musical sound that had first drawn him to her 6 years ago. Then he saw the children, 4 of them, all the same age, all with features that make his heart stop. 2 boys running to a man in a world's best uncle shirt. 2 girls, one examining leaves while the other cooed at rabbits. They had Me's smile, but those eyes, he saw his own mother's eyes looking back at him, multiplied by 4. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Quadruplets, his children. The mathematics was undeniable. The timing, their age, their features, it all added up to an earth-shattering truth. He'd had not just 1 child, but 4, somewhere in the world all this time. He watched as the man he now realized must be Me's brother helped the children onto the carousel. The twins waved from their painted horses while May took photos, her face glowing with pride and love. They looked happy, complete, without him. Anger fled unexpectedly in his chest. How dare she keep this from him? Those were his children too. He had a right to know them, to be part of their lives. The fact that they called another man uncle, that they were growing up without knowing their father, it felt like a personal attack. His new wife, Sophia, was at a spa retreat this weekend. They'd been married for 2 years, a perfect social match that had produced nothing but polite conversation and separate vacations. No children. Not ready yet, Sophia would say, though Ray suspected she just didn't want to ruin her figure. Now, watching these 4 beautiful children, his children, play and laugh, Ray felt the full weight of what he'd thrown away. He pulled out his phone and discreetly took some photos, his hands shaking slightly. Then he called his lawyer. "I need you to look into something," he said quietly, moving behind a vendor's tent to avoid being spotted. "I just discovered I have children. 4 of them. And I want to know my rights." What Ray didn't notice as he plotted his next move was the genuine joy in his children's faces as they played with their uncle. He didn't see how May had taught them to share the last bite of cotton candy or how they instinctively reached for each other when scared by a too loud carnival game. He missed the 1,000 little signs that showed these children were being raised with love, wisdom, and care. As the family packed up to leave the festival, tired but happy, Ray watched from a distance. The kids hugged their uncle goodbye. He apparently had to head back early for work and piled into Me's modest minivan, chattering about their favorite parts of the day. What happened next would set in motion events that would test not just Me's strength, but the very meaning of family itself. The court papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, right after May had sent the kids off to school. She stood in her kitchen, still wearing her coffee-stained teaching sweater, staring at the official documents with trembling hands. Ray was suing for partial custody of all 4 children. "He can't do this," her sister whispered when May called her voice-breaking. He gave up any right to them when he left. But they both knew it wasn't that simple. Ray had money, power, and a team of expensive lawyers. May had her savings from the music academy and a mother's fierce determination to protect her children. The local lawyer she consulted, Mr. Chen, no relation, was honest with her. "This won't be easy," he said, his kind eyes showing concern behind wire-rimmed glasses. "But you've done everything right. You never asked him for money, never denied him access because he never sought it. You've created a stable, loving home. That counts for a lot in family court." The hardest part was telling the children. That evening, as they sat around their dinner table eating Mom's special noodle soup, Me tried to explain. "Remember how I told you that sometimes families are different? Well, your father, he knows about you now, and he wants to meet you." Luna dropped her spoon. Lily grabbed Tommy's hand. Alex just stared at his bowl. "But why now?" Tommy finally asked, his small voice full of confusion. "Doesn't he know we're happy just us?" The news spread through their small town quickly. The next morning, parents of Me's music students started showing up with casseroles and offers to help. Mrs. Wu brought over her famous dumplings and stayed to watch the kids while Mai met with her lawyer. The local coffee shop owner, whose daughter took piano lessons, started a fundraiser for legal fees. Ray's legal team made their first move, a demand for DNA testing. The day of the test, Mei's entire family came to support them. The children, scared of needles, were brave because they saw their mother being brave. The nurse doing the blood draw gave them each a lollipop and said they were the most well-behaved kids she ever met. The media caught wind of the story. Billionaire discovers secret quadruplets screamed one headline. Music teacher's hidden fortune claimed another. Reporters started showing up at the music academy, trying to get photos of the children. Mai had to temporarily move her lessons online to protect her students' privacy. Through it all, she tried to maintain normalcy for her kids. They still had their Friday movie nights, cuddled together on their worn but comfortable couch. She still helped with homework, kissed scraped knees, and made pancakes in funny shapes for weekend breakfasts. But now there were also meetings with lawyers, whispered phone calls after bedtime, and a constant worry about what would happen next. Ray's wife, Sophia, gave interviews painting herself as the victim, claiming Mai had deliberately hidden the children to extort money later. But then something unexpected happened. 3 of Ray's former girlfriends came forward with similar stories of abandonment when they didn't fit his social expectations. Their stories painted a pattern that couldn't be ignored. The DNA results came back positive, surprising no one. Ray's lawyers immediately demanded immediate visitation rights. But when the judge asked the children if they wanted to meet their father, their responses touched everyone in the courtroom. "We already have a family," Lily said firmly, holding her siblings' hands. "We have Mama and Uncle Kai and Grandma and Grandpa and Mrs. Wu next door and all our friends. We don't need anyone else." The judge, a grandmother herself, watched as the quadruplets supported each other through their testimony. She saw how they looked to their mother for reassurance, how they spoke of their life with love and security. She also noticed how Ray, sitting with his expensive legal team, seemed more interested in his phone than his children's words. Mei's local lawyer might not have had the fanciest office, but he had something Ray's legal team didn't: genuine care for his clients. He presented evidence of the stable life Mai had built, report cards showing the children's good grades, testimonials from their teachers, photos of birthday parties and school plays where extended family filled the audience. "Your Honor," he said in his closing statement, "these children haven't just survived without Mr. Lee's involvement. They've thrived. They have a mother who has moved mountains to give them a good life, a community that supports them, and most importantly, they have each other. The only disruption to their well-being has been the sudden intrusion of a man who, until now, showed no interest in their existence." As the court case continued, secrets began spilling out like overturned ink. It started with a phone call to Mei's lawyer late one evening. A woman named Jun, Ray's former secretary, couldn't keep quiet anymore after seeing the news about the quadruplets. "I remember that wedding day," Jun said, her voice shaking. "I was there when Ray's mother made the phone call. She told him he'd lose everything, his inheritance, his position in the company, his social standing, if he married a kindergarten teacher. She'd already arranged a marriage with the daughter of their biggest business partner." Mai listened to this revelation in her lawyer's office, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. She thought about how Ray's mother had always seemed to be whispering in his ear, how she insisted on controlling every aspect of the wedding. The pieces were falling into place. But it wasn't just Jun who came forward. The wedding planner broke her silence too, sharing security camera footage from that morning. It showed Ray arguing with his mother in the church office, his face torn between love and fear. "You're just like your father," his mother had said. "Weak, thinking with your heart instead of your head. Look where that got him, divorced and forgotten." The judge watched the footage carefully, noting how Ray had crumpled under his mother's manipulation. But what really caught her attention was the next clip, Ray returning to the church that evening, after everyone had left, finding Mei's handwritten vows left behind on the altar and breaking down in tears. During cross-examination, Ray's perfect facade began to crack. Asked why he never looked for Mai after the wedding, he admitted the truth. "I was a coward," he said, his voice barely audible in the courtroom. "I chose money and status over love. By the time I realized what I'd done, I thought it was too late to fix it." His current wife, Sophia, stopped coming to court after that. The society pages soon buzzed with news of their separation. She'd married him for his social position, just as his mother had planned. Finding out he'd once chosen love over status, even if he'd later abandoned it, shattered her image of him. The Quadruplets, now regular topics of gossip columns, handled the attention with surprising grace. At school, when classmates asked about their billionaire father, they simply said, "We already have all the family we need." Their teacher reported that they'd become even closer, watching out for each other more than ever. One day, while waiting for another court session to begin, Ray overheard Tommy telling his siblings a story during their supervised lunch break. "Remember when I was scared of thunderstorms, and Mama stayed up all night teaching us to count between lightning and thunder to know how far away it was? She made it into a game, and now I'm not scared anymore." The other children chimed in with their own memories, how their mom let them paint clouds on their bedroom ceiling, how she knew each of their different laughs, how she worked extra lessons to buy them new shoes for school. Ray listened, realizing these were the moments he'd missed, the kind of parent he'd never become. During one particularly tense session, Luna spoke up unexpectedly. "Why didn't you want us?" she asked Ray directly, her small voice carrying across the courtroom. "Mama says everyone deserves love, even when they make mistakes. Did we do something wrong?" The room fell silent. Ray, for all his wealth and power, couldn't find words to answer his daughter's simple question. It was May who finally spoke, gathering Luna in her arms. "Nobody did anything wrong, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make choices they regret, but that doesn't mean anyone is unlovable." The local community continued rallying around May and the children. When Ray's lawyers tried to argue that she couldn't provide the same opportunities he could, her students' parents testified about the scholarships she'd created, the instruments she'd repaired for free, the extra time she spent with struggling students. They painted a picture not of wealth, but of richness in all the ways that truly mattered. Mrs. Wu, now practically a grandmother to the Quadruplets, brought her famous dumplings to every court session. "Food makes courage," she'd say, passing out paper bags to everyone, even Ray's lawyers. Watching his children eagerly eat these homemade treats, Ray realized they had something he'd never had, a life filled with genuine love and care, not just expensive things. As the case neared its end, a final revelation emerged. Ray's father, long absent from the business world, sent a letter to the judge. He wrote about leaving his family's company to pursue his passion for teaching, how he'd found happiness in a simpler life, and how he regretted not being strong enough to show his son that there were more important things than social status. The truth was clear now. This wasn't just about custody. It was about breaking cycles, about choosing love over fear, about finding courage to stand up for what really matters. The question remaining was whether Ray could learn from his mistakes before it was too late. The judge delivered her decision on a quiet Thursday morning. The courtroom was packed. May's music students and their parents, Mrs. Wu with her ever-present bag of dumplings, Uncle Kai wearing his world's best uncle shirt, and even Ray's father sitting quietly in the back row. In matters of family law, the judge began, adjusting her glasses. "We must always prioritize the children's well-being. These 4 remarkable young people have shown us what family truly means." She smiled at the Quadruplets, who sat close together, holding hands as they always did in important moments. The judge's decision was clear. May would retain full custody. Ray would pay 5 years of back child support, calculated to match what he would have provided if he'd been present from the beginning. But there was more. The judge had seen something worth saving. "Mr. Lee," she addressed Ray directly, "you made a terrible mistake 6 years ago. But I've watched you during these proceedings. I've seen how you listen to your children's stories, how you've begun to understand what really matters. Therefore, I'm granting you supervised visitation rights, with the possibility of revision after 1 year, if the children wish it." Ray, who'd expected to either win everything or lose everything, found himself facing a different kind of challenge. Not one solved by money or power, but by patience, humility, and genuine effort. The changes began slowly. Ray started attending the children's school events, sitting quietly in the back. He learned that Tommy loved dinosaurs, Luna was teaching herself to juggle, Alex could solve puzzles faster than anyone in his class, and Lily had inherited her mother's gift for music. During their first supervised visit, Ray brought expensive toys, but the children were more interested in teaching him their favorite card game, one their mother had invented to help them learn math. Watching them laugh together, the supervisor noted how they naturally included him in their little family jokes and traditions. Me, showing grace that surprised everyone, helped the children navigate this new relationship. Everyone deserves a chance to grow, she told them, remembering how her own father had once taught her about forgiveness. The kids started calling him Papa Ray, not quite Dad, but a beginning. The back-child support changed things too, but not in the way Ray expected. May used it to expand her music academy, creating a foundation that provided instruments and lessons to children who couldn't afford them. Everyone should have a chance to make their own music, she said at the opening ceremony, but children proudly playing a quartet they'd practiced for weeks. Ray's mother, seeing her carefully laid plans crumble, tried one last time to interfere. She threatened to cut Ray off completely. But standing in May's modest living room, watching his children perform their music recital, Ray finally found his courage. "I already lost them once because of fear," he told his mother. "I won't lose them again." The true turning point came during a thunderstorm. Ray was there for a supervised visit when the power went out. Instead of panicking, the children excitedly pulled out flashlights and invited him to join their storm adventure, counting seconds between lightning and thunder, just as their mother had taught them. In that moment, Ray understood what real parenting meant. As months passed, Ray made unexpected changes in his own life. He stepped back from his company's day-to-day operations, started teaching business classes at the local community college, and bought a small house in May's town. His father, watching this transformation, began rebuilding their own relationship. Mrs. Wu, ever the neighborhood grandmother, started including Ray in her dumpling deliveries. "Family grows like garden," she told him while teaching him how to fold the wrappers properly. "Need patience, care, and a little bit of magic." 1 year later, when the court reviewed the visitation arrangements, the children had their own announcement to make. They'd written a song about their unique family, performed with May on piano, Ray turning pages, Uncle Kai filming proudly, and Mrs. Wu wiping happy tears from her eyes. "See," Luna explained to the judge, "we figured out that having more people to love isn't a bad thing. Mama taught us that family is like music. You can always add more notes to make the harmony better." The final scene of their story played out not in a courtroom, but at the children's elementary school graduation. Ray and Mai sat together, not as enemies or even awkward ex-almost spouses, but as parents who had learned to put their children first. When Tommy stumbled over a word during his speech, both of them leaned forward with the same encouraging smile. As the children received their certificates, the principal noted how they'd helped their whole class understand that families come in all shapes and sizes. The quadruplets beamed, surrounded by their unique support system, their strong, loving mother, their learning to be better father, their doting uncle, their honorary grandmother Mrs. Wu, and an entire community that had become extended family. Sometimes, May reflected later that evening, watching their children play in the backyard, while Ray helped Mrs. Wu set up for the graduation party. The happy ending isn't what we originally planned. Sometimes it's better.